Hello Year 11, welcome to today's learning. We're going to be looking at the UK's economic hubs and how they are significant to the UK's economy. So first thing I want you to think about is what happened in 2008 that impacted the economy of the UK and actually the entire world. So pause the video now, answering that question. Okay, so the answer is it was the financial crisis. In 2008, the UK and indeed the rest of the world experienced a financial crisis. Many banks collapsed. We saw the collapse of the bank Northern Rock that some of you may or may not know. And billions was wiped off the price of shares. Investors stopped buying into companies. The government had to step in and bail out, finance many banks. It brought Santander Bank. The government also had to borrow money to pay for other things like schools and hospitals. Hospitals and schools in particular have invested lots of their money into the banks and they lost everything. So people literally just lost everything. Slowly the economy has been recovering. But the economy's recovered at different rates in different places. So the London and the South East have recovered more quickly and their economy is growing again. But industrial areas like the North East of England have found economic growth much, much harder to achieve. And we still see, that we learnt from last lesson, high unemployment rates in the North and the North East in particular. So that's what happened. Obviously, we are now in another financial crisis in that we are borrowing huge amounts of money to pay for the COVID, people's furlough and things like that. And again, we're going to have to spend a huge amount of money paying this back. And again, London and the South East will recover more quickly than the north of the UK, where unemployment rates will continue to remain high for a while. So, economic hubs. Economic hubs can be whole cities, such as Oxford and Cambridge. They're both economic hubs. They can be districts within cities, such as Canary Wharf within London. They're normally high-tech, research-based industries, and they have a highly qualified graduate labour force. They could also be businesses and science parks located on the outskirts of towns and cities, often tapping into local universities' talent. Now, we do have a bit of an economic hub in Portsmouth, and that is the business park in Farlington kind of way, just by QA Hospital. That area around there where we have IBM in particular, and that business park there is kind of the economic hub of Portsmouth. It's actually where a lot of money is made in that business park, and to a degree they do tap into Portsmouth University graduates. They also tap into schools now, in that they have opened UTC, which has huge links with that business park. Huge. And they're tapping into local talent, is what they're basically doing. So that's what an economic hub is. We also have two different types of cities. So we have high growth cities. Now, London isn't ranked a city because the City of London is just that really 1 square mile in central London, where City of London, the Metropolitan Police, it's actually City of London, not the Metropolitan Police, police. So the City of London isn't technically a city, and London is split into boroughs, so it's not technically a city. So if London was a city, it would be ranked number 1, but London's a complicated place. So just think, okay, London's number 1. But actually, what we do is we give schools to cities. So we look at their businesses, we look at their employment levels, we look at the demographic growth, we look at what percentage of the population are working age, and we start to look at homes and office spaces. Are homes affordable? Are there enough homes for people? Are there enough office spaces to open new businesses? And it gives a score. Manchester comes out as number 1. Then Birmingham, Milton Keynes, Bristol, Brighton, Nottingham, Leicester, Swindon, Peterborough, and Cambridge as number 10. So these are high growth cities, and the high growth index are the 3 things on this area here. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to describe the criteria that a city has to fulfill in order to make it into the top 10 high growth cities. Now, it's pretty obvious, but I want this written as a paragraph, please. So pause the video now and answering the question as a paragraph. Okay, so we also have something called dynamic cities. Now, these are slightly different. And what these are, again, if London was a city, it would be considered the top. These are cities that have the potential to be high growth. They've got the potential to be something really special as a city. So to be a dynamic city, you need to have knowledge-intensive businesses or quaternary industry with most potential for growth. You need a highly skilled workforce educated to degree level or above. You need new business formation, growth potential in businesses, good transport connections, including road, rail, and air links. And that's to get obviously people in and out, and that could be people from Europe, it could just be people from the UK, or it could be international people, and therefore you'd need an international airport for them. So Cambridge, no surprise given the university, comes out as the most dynamic city in the UK. And apart from a few isolated pockets, the far north of England scores really badly, as does the band south of Cheshire and north of Birmingham that stretches through the east of the country, and the southwest, Devon and Cornwall, also scores very low. So they're not very dynamic cities. So we have high growth cities. Manchester comes out. It's got everything it needs to start a new business. It would be a good place to invest in. There's really good growth coming out of these cities. But then there's the dynamic cities. Now, these are basically cities that are much more high-tech, clever, and Cambridge, Reading, Manchester, again's up there. Bristol, Oxford, Brighton is again there. Milton Keynes and Leeds, Warrington, and Nottingham. So these are cities that really could take on London in the future. So I want you again to describe the criteria in order to make it onto the top 10 dynamic cities growths. And then I want you to tell me what's the difference between a dynamic city, looking at the criteria, and a high growth city. 2 really important distinctions between these cities. So pause the video now and answering the 2 questions, please. Okay, we're not going to do any work on this, but I do want to just explain growth poles and corridors to you. So growth poles is where growth starts from. So for example, let's just take London and Southampton. The growth starts in Southampton and it spreads out along this corridor. Now, the corridor in this case is the M3 motorway. So all along the M3 motorway, we see lots and lots of kind of high growth places. So places like Winchester, places like I can't think what it begins with. My mind's just gone. Basingstoke. There we are. I knew it was going to come. All along that M3 corridor, we see this growth coming out of London all the way down to Southampton. It also happens along Brighton. Again, that's a road, but primarily that's a train link. All right. We see this happening between Liverpool, Manchester, and Leeds. Now, this is linked through motorways and also a very fast train link. And what they're trying to do, they're also trying to link more things to London. So that HS1, HS2 we looked at will create growth along the corridor. Okay, and that's kind of all it really is. It's where growth starts from one place and then it spreads out. Now you can see here that everything seems to spread from London. So London, Milton Keynes, London, Cambridge, London, Essex, London, Brighton, Southampton, Bristol. Okay, there's very few growth poles and corridors up north. There's none in the southwest. There's very few in Wales and this kind of East Anglia region here. So you can see that we are connected intrinsically to London through these growth poles and growth corridors. We're not really connected to Manchester or Leeds. There's the M1, but actually most of our growth, most of our money comes out of London and it spreads down into Southampton. So I'm not going to get you to do this task. It's slightly complicated to be doing for home learning, and it's something we will pick back up on when we get back into class. So, a bit of exam practice. You have a picture from the textbook that is potentially sideways, because try as I might, I can't seem to turn the thing around. So I want you to describe the pattern of core economic hubs in the UK. So where are they? So this is 4 marks. We need about 8 lines. I need you to tell me where roughly they are. Where's the pattern of them? Okay, and then we need some examples, and then there are anomalies on there. There's ones that don't fit. So if you're saying all the economic hubs are found in the southeast, okay, well, are there any not in the southeast? That's your anomaly. So have a look through. Have a read about them, and then answering this for 4 marks. Okay, so London's place in the economy. London has a population of 8.6 million, biggest city in the UK. Population growth is 1.2 million per year. That only ranks it 5th. It isn't particularly great at growing. That sounds mad, doesn't it? You'd think London was the fastest growing, but it is not. Businesses per 10,000 people, there's 463, ranks at number 1. New businesses being set up ranks number 1. Value added per worker ranks number 1. Okay, highest level qualification, 46.5% of people have degrees, only ranks it 4th. Oxford and Cambridge will definitely be up there higher. Percentage of people with GCSE, 62.8, ranks it 5th in the UK. Weekly wages, £634, ranks at number 1. And the average house price is £461,000. If I tell you it's 250 in Portsmouth, that will give you an indication of how expensive London is. So during the 21st century, the economic divide between London and the rest of the UK is definitely widened. London has everything: high wages, best houses, best jobs, best everything. All right, and some of you will go to London for a job when you leave here. I certainly did. As soon as I left university, London was the place to be. It was the place to get a career and a job. Obviously, it didn't last, because then I moved back to Africa to try and start something there. I don't know, I got bored of the city. 13% of the UK's population, but it generates 22% of the UK's wealth. That's huge. And London ranks above all other cities for most aspects of economic performance. You can see on the table there that London really is the place to be if you want to earn money. Okay. And it is the place. And we can look here at London's role even further. If we were to have a look at the index that you have on your Google form, and it's also on here, it shows the dominant role played by London during growth. So if we were to break London down into our high growth, you will see here that London becomes pretty much the place. All right, and only Manchester, which topped it, is 6th. So Tower Hamlets, Newham, Hackney, Southwark and Lambeth all come way above it. Now, these aren't even cities. Manchester's a massive city. This is a small kind of county borough, with like Fratton in Portsmouth. This is how big London is. Tower Hamlets, a region of London, is bigger than an entire city of Manchester. Obviously, Portsmouth is not featuring on here, but Tower Hamlets is like Fratton, Milton. It's a part of London. And only Manchester outside London makes it inside the top 10. Outside London, the cities are actually the major drivers of growth. And things like Manchester, Birmingham, Brighton and Hove, Milton Keynes. But of the top 50, 23 of them are of London boroughs. Okay, it is huge how big London is. And you can see even in here that Slough, which some people would argue is part of London, Birmingham and Manchester, no one else even comes close. And if you think Birmingham has 1.1 million people living in it, all right, it's the second largest city, and yet it features 16th on the growth of producing money for the UK to grow. And Birmingham, with a population of 1.1 million, and each of these London boroughs are all much, much higher than it for making money. It's just insane. So I want you to evaluate the contribution that London makes to the UK's economy growth rate. So I want you to tell me how London does, and also, does it not? Okay, is it exclusively London? So London makes a huge economic impact on the UK. If it wasn't for London, then it wouldn't be as rich as we are. Okay, it's London that makes all of our money. However, it's not just London. So yes, it does make it. You've got all of this information. Please do use it in order to answer this question. So the word evaluate means that you have to tell me how London does and how London doesn't contribute to the UK's economy. Okay, how it is that London is contributing to us being wealthy, and how it's not just London. All right, so there has to be a balance on here. Use some of the data. Okay, use things like outside London, it's cities that are acting as the major drivers of growth, with 18 among the top 50. So 18 are the cities, whereas in London, it's little boroughs making up the growth. So make sure you have a balanced answer in this, how it does and how it doesn't. So this is all about, just to kind of really make this very clear, about the contribution London makes to the UK's growth. Okay, so in the terms of money, if we're thinking about our economy, say, worth 6 billion, Tower Hamlets makes up most of that 6 billion. Okay, and use the data on this slide that we've just looked at as well to tell me how it does and doesn't. Okay, so the fact that it's 10,000 businesses there's 463 businesses for every 10,000 people. So use this data as well. It's all on your Google form. So pause the video now and answering the question. Okay, so you have a Google Drive link that you can click on. Have a look at the map. This tells us what residents of other cities think about London's importance. So discuss the reasons for the varying percentages given. One, why do some people think that London is so great? 30% of people in Southampton think that London's important. Okay, whereas it's lower in some of the others. So why is there a difference? Then I want you to describe the pattern on the map. How do people's views of London vary according to where they live? Now, you do have to click on the dots in order to be able to get the information. Okay, so that's quite important for you. Some people will look at it and be like, Miss, I don't really understand what I'm supposed to be doing. Click on the dot, it has a percentage. So, for example, it says Southampton 30%. Okay, it says Newcastle 14% if you click on those pins. And that's people's views of London. Do they think that London has a positive impact? Do they like London? So 30% of people in Southampton like London, but that's lower in Newcastle, only 14%. And why do you think the pattern exists? Why do you think the closer to London you are, maybe more people like it, the further away, people don't like it? What reasons for that? So pause the video now, answering these questions. Okay, so what we have here is people's feelings. So these are all written on your Google form. So if we just take the shortest one. A family in Liverpool living on benefits. They've got no disposable income, so no additional income. All their money goes on bills. And thus have never visited London, so there's no money for it. So what I want you to do is, I want you to say these are my chosen one. Okay, I want you to tell me why would people have this view of London. Okay, so a family in Liverpool living on benefits, having no extra money, disposable income, and have never visited London, they're not going to have a particularly positive impact of London. They've never been there, they don't know what it's about, and they see absolutely no benefit coming out of London. All right, they literally just think to themselves, I don't really get why it's important, never been there, don't really care about it. Okay, and what reasons would make them feel that way? So pause the video now. You're going to pick one group and you're going to tell me why they have that view. So pause the video now, answering the final question. Okay, and that's it for today's lesson. We will go on to the next bit next lesson, but this should take you about an hour's worth of work. I don't want to give you an awful lot more than the hour. So any questions, please ask me on Google Forms. Otherwise, sorry, not on Google Forms. Don't ask me on Google Forms. Ask me on Google Classroom. Otherwise, I will see you again for your next lesson.